Natalie Winters stood before the full-length mirror in her apartment, barely recognizing the woman staring back. When did I become so tired? She wondered, running her fingers through her dark hair. At 34, she had built a successful architecture firm, designed buildings that touched the sky, but somewhere along the way, she had forgotten to design a life for herself. Her best friend, Claire, burst through the bedroom door holding a shimmering emerald dress. Tonight changes everything, Claire announced with determination. You're coming to the Harrison charity auction with me, and I won't take no for an answer. Natalie hesitated. I have blueprints to review. The blueprints can wait, Claire interrupted. When was the last time you felt beautiful? When did you last let someone see you? Really see you? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Natalie couldn't remember. Years of 12-hour workdays and lonely dinners had dulled something essential inside her. She had convinced herself that success was enough. That professional achievement could fill the empty spaces in her heart. The auction night, the grand ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the soft murmur of Manhattan's elite. Natalie felt out of place in the emerald dress, even though Claire insisted she looked stunning. She clutched her champagne glass like a lifeline, scanning the crowd of confident faces. That's when she felt it. A presence, a weight of attention that made her skin tingle. Across the room stood a man who seemed to command the very air around him. Tall, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that held both warmth and secrets. He was watching her with an intensity that made her breath catch. He moved through the crowd with purpose, never breaking eye contact. Natalie Winters, he said when he reached her, his voice like smooth whiskey. I'm Damien Cross. I've been following your work for some time. Your design for the Riverside complex was extraordinary. She blinked in surprise. You know my work? His smile was slow, deliberate. I make it my business to know remarkable things. And you, Miss Winters, are quite remarkable. Heat crept up her neck. She wasn't used to this, to being seen as more than just the serious architect in the corner office. Damien's gaze traveled over her face with an appreciation that felt both thrilling and terrifying. The first spark, tell me something, Damien said, leaning closer. When you design a building, do you think about the people who will live inside it? The lives they'll lead? The moments they'll share? Natalie found herself drawn into the conversation, speaking with a passion she usually reserved for her work. Always. Architecture isn't just about structure. It's about creating spaces where life can unfold, where people can become who they're meant to be. And what about your space? He asked quietly. What kind of life are you creating for yourself? The question struck something deep within her. She looked away, suddenly vulnerable. I don't know anymore. Damien's hand brushed hers, just a whisper of contact, but it sent electricity racing through her veins. Perhaps it's time to remember, he murmured. The auction proceeded around them, but Natalie was barely aware of it. All she could focus on was this man who seemed to see straight through her carefully constructed walls. When he asked if she'd join him for air on the terrace, she found herself nodding before her cautious mind could object. Beneath the stars, the terrace overlooked the city, a sea of lights stretching into the distance. The night air was cool against Natalie's flushed skin. Damien stood beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. I haven't done this in years, she admitted softly. Just ... stopped. Breathed. Felt alive. Why not? His voice was gentle, without judgment. I was afraid, I think. Afraid that if I stopped moving, stopped achieving, I'd realize how empty everything had become. The words tumbled out before she could stop them. A confession she hadn't even made to herself. Damien turned to face her fully, his expression serious. Natalie, look at me. When she met his eyes, she saw understanding there and something else. Desire, yes, but also tenderness. You are not empty. You're just dormant, like a garden in winter. Sometimes we need someone to remind us that spring is possible. Her heart hammered against her ribs. And you think you can do that? Remind me? He stepped closer, near enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. I'd like to try. If you'll let me. The space between them felt charged with possibility. Natalie realized she was standing at a crossroads. She could retreat back into her safe, lonely world of blueprints and deadlines. Or she could step forward into the unknown, toward this man who seemed to see her in a way no one had in years. The promise, "I'm scared," she whispered. "Good," Damien replied, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. "Fear means you're alive. It means you're feeling again." His hand reached up, gentle fingers tracing the line of her jaw. The touch was featherlight, but it ignited something that had been sleeping inside her for far too long. "Have dinner with me tomorrow," he said. "No expectations, no pressure. Just two people getting to know each other. Let me show you that it's safe to want more, to be more than just your achievements." Natalie felt tears prick her eyes. When had anyone offered her something so simple yet so profound? "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, I'd like that." As they stood together under the stars, Natalie felt something shift deep within her. The walls she'd built brick by brick over years of loneliness began to crack. For the first time in ages, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she could remember what it felt like to truly live. The morning after Natalie woke, with sunlight streaming through her windows and a feeling she hadn't experienced in years: anticipation. The memory of Damien's touch, his words, the way he'd looked at her, played on repeat in her mind. She caught herself smiling at her reflection while brushing her teeth. Claire called before noon. "So, tell me everything about the mysterious man you disappeared with last night." "His name is Damien Cross," Natalie said, unable to keep the warmth from her voice. "We're having dinner tonight," Claire squealed. Finally, you were actually letting someone in. But as the day wore on, doubt crept in. What was she doing? She barely knew this man. What if this was a mistake? What if she'd forgotten how to be anything other than the serious, focused architect everyone expected her to be? The dinner Damien had chosen a small Italian restaurant tucked away in the West Village, intimate and warm with candlelight dancing across white tablecloths. When Natalie arrived, he stood immediately, his eyes lighting up in a way that made her feel like the only woman in the world. "You came," he said softly, pulling out her chair. "Did you think I wouldn't?" "I hoped you would. But I also know how easy it is to talk ourselves out of taking chances." His honesty disarmed her. Over wine and pasta, they talked. Really talked. Damien shared stories of his journey from a struggling entrepreneur to building a tech company that revolutionized urban planning software. But he also spoke of loss, of a marriage that had ended years ago, of forgetting himself in the pursuit of success. "I see myself in you," he admitted, his eyes holding hers. "That determination, that drive. But also that loneliness you're trying so hard to hide." Natalie's throat tightened. "Is it that obvious?" "Only to someone who's lived it." He reached across the table, his fingers intertwining with hers. "We forget that being strong doesn't mean being alone. That vulnerability isn't weakness." The warmth of his hand in hers felt like coming home. "I've been alone so long, I don't know how to be anything else." "Then let me show you," Damien said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "One moment at a time." The rooftop after dinner, Damien suggested a walk. They ended up on the rooftop of his apartment building. The city sprawling beneath them, like a blanket of stars brought to earth. The night air wrapped around them, cool and electric with possibility. "I have a confession," Damien said, turning to face her. "I didn't just happen to be at that auction. I knew you'd be there. I've wanted to meet you for months, ever since I saw you present at the architecture summit. The way you spoke about creating spaces for human connection, for community, for life, I thought, here's a woman who understands what matters. But then I watched you leave alone, and I wondered if you were living the philosophy you were preaching." Natalie felt exposed, seen in a way that was both frightening and exhilarating. "I'm a hypocrite, you mean?" "No," he said firmly, stepping closer. "You're human. We all lose our way sometimes. The question is whether we're brave enough to find it again." His hands came up to cup her face, gentle but sure. "Natalie, I haven't felt this drawn to someone in years. There's something between us, something real. Tell me you feel it too." "I do," she whispered, her heart racing. "But I'm terrified." "Of what?" "Of this not being real. Of getting lost in someone else the way I got lost in my work? Of being hurt? Of he silenced her with a kiss, soft and tender, a question and an answer all at once. Natalie felt her carefully constructed defenses crumble. His lips moved against hers with a gentleness that spoke of patience, of understanding, of a desire that went deeper than physical attraction. When they pulled apart, both breathless, Damien rested his forehead against hers. We don't have to rush anything. But don't run from this. From us. Promise me you won't run. Transformation over the next 2 weeks? Natalie felt herself changing. Damien would send her texts in the middle of her workday. Have you looked up from your desk today? The world is still here, waiting for you. She'd find herself smiling. Actually leaving the office before 8. Meeting him for impromptu dinners and long walks through the city, he introduced her to small pleasures she'd forgotten, watching sunrise from Brooklyn Bridge, trying street food from vendors in Queens, dancing in his living room to old jazz records. With every shared moment, every conversation that stretched late into the night, every touch that grew more confident and familiar, Natalie felt herself awakening. But it wasn't just about him. Damien had a gift for reflecting her back to herself, for asking questions that made her examine her choices, her fears, her dreams. What would you design if you could design anything? He asked one evening. What does your perfect space look like? She found herself sketching ideas she'd pushed aside for years, projects that fed her soul rather than just her bank account. She started taking lunch breaks, calling old friends, even taking a yoga class Claire had been begging her to try. You're glowing, Claire observed one afternoon. This is what being in love looks like. Love. The word terrified and thrilled Natalie in equal measure. The invitation 3 weeks after they met. Damien called her. I have a proposition. I own a cottage upstate, right on a lake. Come away with me this weekend. No phones, no work, no distractions. Just us. Natalie's breath caught. This felt significant. A threshold she couldn't uncross once she stepped over it. I want to, she said honestly, but I'm scared of how much I want it. Then be scared and come anyway, Damien said softly. Sometimes the best things in life require us to be brave. I'll pick you up Friday evening. And Natalie, pack something comfortable. This weekend is about remembering who you are when you're not performing for the world. As she hung up, Natalie realized she was crying. But these weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief, of hope, of a heart that was finally, tentatively opening again. The drive upstate felt like traveling through time itself. With every mile that separated them from the city, Natalie felt the weight of her old life lifting. Damien drove with one hand on the wheel, the other resting on her knee. His touch a constant reassurance that this was real, that she wasn't dreaming. Tell me what you're thinking, he said as they wound through tree-lined roads painted in autumn. Colors. I'm thinking that I can't remember the last time I let myself want something this much. It feels dangerous. He glanced at her, his expression tender. The most worthwhile things usually do. The cottage appeared like something from a storybook. Nestled among tall pines with a wooden dock stretching into a mirror-still lake. The setting sun painted the water gold and amber, and Natalie felt her breath catch at the beauty of it. It's perfect, she whispered. Damien came around to open her door, his hand settling on her waist as he helped her down. So are you, he murmured against her ear, and she shivered at the intimacy of it. The first evening inside, the cottage was cozy and warm. A fire crackled in the stone fireplace, and through the windows the lake gleamed in the fading light. Damien had stocked the kitchen with fresh ingredients, wine, and her favorite dark chocolate that he'd somehow remembered her mentioning weeks ago. You planned this, she said, touched by the thoughtfulness evident in every detail. I wanted you to feel cared for. When was the last time someone took care of you, Natalie? The question brought unexpected tears to her eyes. She couldn't remember. Years of independence, of proving she didn't need anyone, had left her starving for exactly this kind of attention. Damien pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her in a way that felt like safety itself. You don't have to be strong here. Not with me. You can just be. They cooked dinner together, laughing as they fumbled through a recipe. their movements growing more comfortable as they learned the rhythm of sharing space. Damien would brush past her to reach for a spice, his touch lingering just a moment longer than necessary. Natalie found herself leaning into him, craving the connection. Over wine and pasta they'd made together, conversation flowed easily. But there was something different now, an undercurrent of awareness, of possibility humming between them, the confession later. They sat on the porch wrapped in blankets, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. The lake was silent except for the occasional call of a night bird. "I need to tell you something," Natalie said, her voice quiet but firm. "I'm falling for you. Maybe I've already fallen. And it terrifies me because I don't know how to do this, how to be vulnerable, how to trust that this won't disappear." Damien set down his wine glass and turned to face her fully. "Look at me, Natalie." When she met his eyes, she saw her own vulnerability reflected back. "I'm falling for you too. Have been since that first night. And yes, it's terrifying. But you know what's more terrifying? Living a half-life because we're too scared to feel fully." He took her hands in his thumbs stroking her wrists, where her pulse raced. "I don't have all the answers. I can't promise we won't hurt each other sometimes, or that this will be easy. But I can promise that I see you, all of you, and I'm not going anywhere." Tears streamed down Natalie's cheeks. "I haven't felt truly loved in ages," she whispered, the words breaking on a sob. "I'd forgotten what it felt like to matter to someone, to be wanted for more than what I can produce or achieve." Damien pulled her onto his lap, cradling her against his chest. "Then let's begin again," he said softly, his lips brushing her temple. "Let me show you every day that you matter. Not the architect, not the achievement. You. The woman who laughs at terrible jokes, who cries at sunsets, who's brave enough to feel again even when it scares her." The surrender they moved inside as the temperature dropped, the fire casting dancing shadows across the room. Damien poured more wine, but neither of them drank. The air felt thick with unspoken desire, with the weight of choice hanging between them.
"Stay with me tonight,"
Damien said, his voice rough with emotion. "Let me hold you. Let me show you what it means to be cherished." Natalie's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. The moment where she chose fear or courage, isolation or connection. She thought of all the years she'd spent alone, convincing herself it was safer that way. And she realized that safety had become its own prison as she breathed. Standing and taking his hand, he led her to the bedroom where moonlight spilled across a bed covered in soft linens. But he didn't rush. Instead, he stood before her, his hands gentle as they framed her face. "You are so beautiful," he murmured. "Not just your face, though you take my breath away. Your strength, your vulnerability, your courage to try again. All of it. All of you." When he kissed her, it was with a reverence that made her tremble. His hands moved slowly, learning the landscape of her body with patient attention, as if they had all the time in the world. And perhaps they did. Natalie felt herself unfurling like a flower that had been closed too long. Every touch, every whispered word of affirmation, every moment of connection healed something she hadn't known was broken. She wasn't just being desired. She was being seen, valued, celebrated for exactly who she was, the morning after Natalie woke to sunlight streaming through windows and the warmth of Damien's arms around her. For a moment, panic fluttered in her chest. What had she done? How had she let herself become so vulnerable? But then Damien stirred, pressing a kiss to her shoulder and murmured, "Good morning, beautiful. How did you sleep?" The tenderness in his voice quieted her fears. She turned in his arms, meeting his eyes. "I slept better than I have in years." They spent the morning in comfortable silence, making coffee. Sitting on the dock with their feet dangling in the cool water, just being together, Natalie realized that this was what she'd been missing. Not just passion or romance, but genuine companionship. The ease of being with someone who accepted her completely. The return on the drive back to the city Sunday evening, Natalie felt different. Not because everything was solved or all her fears had vanished, but because she'd made a choice. She'd chosen to believe that she deserved love, that vulnerability was strength, that opening her heart was worth the risk. What happens now? she asked as the city skyline came into view. Damien reached for her hand. Now we live. We build something together, one day at a time. We stumble and learn and grow. We choose each other again and again. Natalie squeezed his hand, feeling tears of gratitude prick her eyes. I choose you, she said softly. I choose this. I choose to begin again. And as they drove into the glowing city lights, Natalie Winters knew that she was finally, truly coming home to herself.